All right, this video is going to show you what the answer should be to the test review to help you prepare and study for the upcoming test, and it will walk you through any kind of process to solving as well as showing you the actual answers. All right, so for the first few, you are doing multiple choice in terms of picking which one is written correctly based on the statement. So for number one, the cafeteria holds at most 450 people. What that means is it can't hold over 450. It's 450 or fewer, right? So that would be the less than or equal to sign. So the best answer choice would be letter B. Right. For number two, to be an official school club, a club must have at least 15 members. That means 15 members or more. So the symbol that goes along with that would be greater than or equal to. So that would be letter C. For number three, John must earn between $100 and $120 this week. He can earn exactly 100 and exactly 120, right? So your X has to be, or your E in this case, has to be between 100 and 120. We always put the littlest one on the left and the biggest one on the right, right? And then because it's between, you cannot go over 120, but you can be equal to 120. So focus on the 120 part first, right? And when you're looking for it, it has to be less than or equal to that 120, and there's only one of them that has it. So once you figure out that one, then the other one falls into place. Right? So there's only one answer that has those pieces. Remember, in these types of inequalities, the signs have to be facing the same direction. Okay, they cannot be in reverse. Right? So for number four, the ice in the pond must be at least 32 degrees Fahrenheit if we are to be able to skate on it. That means 32, right, or more. Okay, which is greater than or equal to. So that would be letter C. Number five, there should be no more than 25 students in a math class. That means you can have 25 or you can have less, but you can't go over 25. So that would be less than or equal to, which is letter D. Right. Number six, there were fewer than 1,000 fans at the concert. It does not mean that there is exactly 1,000. It just means there is less than 1,000. So that would mean that letter A is the correct choice. For 7 and 8, you're asked to graph each inequality. You may have to solve it first before you can graph it. Remember, the trick to graphing is to make the variable be on the left-hand side so that you can just follow the direction of the arrow, and it's a lot easier to work that way. So for number 7, the X is on the left, so you find positive 4, and because it's greater than or equal to, because it's got an equal piece, you're going to put a closed circle on 4, and greater than or equal to means all the numbers bigger than 4. All right, for number 8, you'll notice the X is not by itself, so you have to solve it first. Right? This is a one-step inequality. So when we divide by -3, remember that if you multiply or divide by a negative number, you have to flip the inequality sign. So the answer is X is greater than -3. Right? Because it does not have a piece of the equal bar, that means the circle is going to be open. So -3 is between -2 and -4 right here. So make an open circle. And then greater than that would be everything to the right of that number. Okay, so that's what that one would look like. All right, for number 9, you want to write an inequality that represents the following situation. All right, before we actually read this and follow through with this, remember in class that I told you for letter C that the symbol should be greater than or equal to right there. Since B and C are the same exact answers, we want to have one that's at least different so you can pick a great answer to satisfy the problem. All right, so now looking at it, 4 less than 3 times the sum of a number and 6 is at most 8. All right, so take it slowly. You see the phrase less than, which means you have to have a minus sign. 4 is less than that, so remember to flip-flop your pieces. 4 is going to go behind the minus sign. And then 3 times the sum of a number and 6. Right? Well, the sum of a number and 6 is x plus 6. And when we take that and multiply it by 3, this is the piece we look at. So we're deciding between B and C at this point. Right? When it says at most 8, that means it cannot go over 8. You can be 8, but you can't go over it. So that's where the less than or equal to piece comes in. So that means our final answer is officially B. All right, for 10 parts A, B, and C, you are to tell whether each inequality is true or false, but you have to show how you know it's true or false. You can't just take a 50-50 guess here. Right? And the best way to do this is just to solve them like you normally would and see if the X value or the variable value works and makes a true statement. All right, so for letter A, because we have variables on both sides, we do exactly like we do in equations. We're going to subtract the 2x. Now I've got x minus 2 is greater than 1. I'm going to add my 2 over. And the answer to this is going to be x is greater than 3. right? So now looking at the value of -2, if you stick -2 in here where that x is and ask yourself, is -2 bigger than 3? You're going to tell yourself no, which means that the answer to letter A is false. X cannot be -2 because it will not work. All right, for letter B, this is a two-step one, so you're going to subtract 7. Now you've got 2w is less than or equal to 10. Divide by 2. We don't need to flip anything because there were no negatives involved. So w is less than or equal to 5. Right? So you ask yourself, if you put 5 here, is 5 less than or equal to itself? Well, because of that equal bar, it is equal to itself. So this would be a true statement. If that little equal bar piece wasn't there, we would have to say false. All right, for letter C, you have a one-step inequality here. All right, so we have to get rid of divide by -5, which means we multiply both sides by -5. Because we are multiplying by a negative, we have to also flip the sign. So this is going to be P is less than -20. Right? And then if you ask yourself by putting -30 right here, is -30 less than -20? That is a true statement. So the answer to this is true. Right? So you can't answer true or false until after you officially solve it, so you know what to check behind. All right, for 11, A, B, and C, you're taking the pictures that are there and you're writing the inequality that came from those pictures, right? So for number 11, if you take a look at it, you see 2 dots and you see it shaded outside in both directions. That's your big major flag that this is an OR problem, because OR is the only one that shades outside like this. So you have to do the left side one and then the word OR and then do the right side one to finish the problem. So if we're looking at the -2, it's x, and then -2 is open, so it'll be less than because it's shaded left of the -2, and then they're -2. So x is less than -2, or now go to the 3, x, and then the 3 is shaded to the right, so that'd be greater than 3. Because they are open circles, we do not need any piece of the equal bar. Okay, so that's what that one would look like. Letter B, there's only one circle, so you're only going to have one variable in here. And it's going to be x, and then we're talking about the -2. It's open and it's shaded to the right, so that means x has to be everything bigger than -2. For letter C, you have one circle and it's closed, it's colored in, and everything is shaded to the right. So you're going to have one variable and you're going to use the number 0, and because it's shaded in, we have to have a piece of the equal bar, and then because it shaded everything to the right, it's going to be greater or equal to. So you will have to be able to do the writing aspect on the test as well as the actual graphing. All right, for 12 through 17, you are just solving each one of these. You are not graphing them. Remember in class that I also told you for number 13 that this is not a 21, this is a 22 right there. That does make the answer come out a little differently. All right, so for number 12, it's a two-step inequality right here. You do like you normally would. You add the 5 to both sides. You have 0.4b is greater than 28. You divide by 0.4. And you have to physically divide this because you can't leave a decimal in a division problem. And you get b is greater than 70. Okay, we do not need to graph this. There's your answer and you're good. All right, for number 13, right, this is a fraction, so we want to get rid of the 4 first. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4. And that frees the top up. So now we've got 3t minus 22 equals 44. Okay, now you're at the two-step part. Oops, sorry, that's not an equal sign. This is what you got to watch out for. We're so used to doing equations that now you have to use those inequality signs. There we go. All right, so now you want to add the 22 to the other side, just like you normally would. And you've got 3t is greater or equal to 66. We're going to divide by 3. There's no need to flip anything because there were no negatives involved. So the answer to this one is t is greater or equal to 22. Okay. All right, for number 14, this is a two-step problem, right? So we do want to move the 8 first, and we're going to subtract 8 to both sides. So 6 minus 8 is -2, is less than or equal to -2m. Now when we go to divide, we are dividing by a negative number, which means we have to flip the inequality sign the other direction. -2 divided by -2 is 1, okay? Flip the less than or equal to greater than or equal to, and then put your m. Now you can leave it like that, or if that really bugs you and you want the variable on the left, then you want to flip it again so it says m is less than or equal to 1. Notice how in the first one it's pointing to the m, so when you rewrite it, it still has to stay pointing to the m. Right? Don't ever change the way it's pointing if you're not trying to flip it. Okay? For number 15, okay, for number 15, this is also a two-step problem, depending on how you look at it. If you subtract the 5 first, you've got x divided by -4 is greater than -21. To get rid of -4, you have to multiply by -4, which means you are going to have to flip the sign. Okay, so that gives you x is less than positive 84 as your answer. All right, so for number 16, it is a multi-step, so do exactly like you would normally do. You're going to have to distribute first. So now you've got 8x minus 4 is greater than -10x plus 50. Okay, you have variables on both sides. -10 is smaller than 8, so we're going to add 10x over. And now we've got 18x minus 4 is greater than 50. We're going to add the 4 next. So now we've got 18x is greater than 54. Okay, and then we're going to divide by 18. And there's no reason to flip anything, so x is greater than 3. Okay. And then for number 17, this is a one-step equation, or if you end up getting rid of fractions first, it'll end up being 2 steps, right? But for the sake of trying to get rid of it in 1 step, there's a fraction in front of the variable, so to get rid of it, multiply by the reciprocal. And because the reciprocal is not negative, you don't need to flip any signs. But just remember that what you do on one side, you do have to do on the other side. Okay, so that crosses off that big fraction right there. And that gives you p is less than or equal to. And then we need to clean up the 2 fractions on the other side. All right, so 5 goes into 25 5 times, and 5 goes into itself once. 6 and 9 can be reduced by 3, so 6 divided by 3 is a 2, 9 divided by 3 is a 3. So now multiply straight across. Just don't forget the negative sign that's in front of that -25 over 9. So we have -5 times 2, which makes -10, and then 3 times 1 is 3. Right? And again, because it's a fraction and you can't reduce it, that's where you stop. Right, for 18 and 19, you are to solve them and graph the following inequalities. Right? Notice that they're and or problems. These are compound inequalities, so you should have 2 dots on your graph, and then shading either goes outside or inside depending on what you got. All right, so for number 18, I can tell this is an or problem because it says the word or right in the middle. So you have to do 2 separate problems and then join your answer with the word or. Right, so this is -2 on both sides. Now you've got -9a is less than 18. Divide by -9, which means you have to flip the sign. So a is greater than -2. Write the word or. Then go and solve the other one. Add 7 to both sides. Now you have -4a is greater than 28. Divide by -4, and once again, you're going to have to flip the signs. So a is less than -7. Now when you go to set up your number line has got to go from smallest to largest. So -7 is smaller than -2. Right? So I'm going to put -7 on the left, -2 on the right, and because you have to have a third number in between, I'm just going to put -5 somewhere in there. All right, so now pay attention to your signs and your dots. -7 has a less than sign, so it's an open circle, and less than means we shade left. Okay, and then -2 has an open circle because it's greater than, and because it's greater than, we shade right. Right, so remember, your OR graphs should be shaded outside those 2 points. Now for number 19, this doesn't say the word and, but because the x is sandwiched between 2 terms or 2 numbers, you know it's and. It'll not always say the word and. So we have to get the x in the middle by itself. So the first thing we're going to do is -8, and we have to minus from the middle, the left, and the right. You've got 3 places to get rid of that 8. Okay, now -12 minus 8 is -20. Bring down less than or equal to 4x. Less than or equal to 48 minus 8 is 40. To get rid of the 4 attached to the x, we're going to divide by 4. What you do in the middle, you have to do on the left and the right. Because we're dividing by +4, we don't need to flip any signs. So this is going to be -5 is less than or equal to x, and that's less than or equal to 10. So now when you're setting up your number line, -5 goes on the left, +10 goes on the right, and find a number kind of in the middle. I'm going to stick 0 in there. Even though it's not perfectly in the middle, it's okay as long as it's between those 2 numbers. -5 has a less than or equal to sign, so we're going to shade that dot in. It's closed. 10 has a less than or equal to sign, so it's going to close that dot. And because x is in between those 2 numbers, we're going to shade in between those 2 dots on your graph. All right, so you will have some of those compound inequalities that you do have to solve and graph. So just make sure you know what you're doing. All right, for number 20, right, you're setting up your own inequality and then solving it to answer the problem. You do not have to actually graph anything, right? Just solving it and setting it up. Right? So for number 30, no, not 32, sorry, number 20, right? Matt has scores of 62.5, 58.3, 62.8, and 70.5 for his first 4 dives in his springboard diving competition. He has to do one more dive, right? If his total score must be greater than 322.7 to win, what is the lowest score he can receive on his 5th dive to still win? All right, so the first thing we want to do is go ahead and add these 4 scores up. 62.5 plus 58.3 plus 62.8 plus 70.5 is going to give you 254.1. Okay, so I just added these together. Okay, and that's where so right now he's got 254.1 points, right? But we're going to add to it his 5th score, which we don't know right now, and it's got to be greater than 322.7 for him to win. Can't be equal, but it's got to be greater. All right, so you have just set yourself up a one-step equation or inequality. All right, that's not that difficult to solve. You want to subtract your 254.1 from both sides. All right, and now you're going to get x is greater than 68.6. So he can't score a 68.6. He has to get bigger than a 68.6 or he does not win. Okay. All right, for number 21, all right, you're just translating it first and then solving it from there. All right, so 3 times a number, so that'd be 3x, is subtracted from 10. That means 10 has to go in front for anything to be subtracted from it. Okay, is at least, that means that it is greater than or equal to. It's got to be that one or more. 6 more than the number. 6 more than the x we don't know about. All right, so this is a variables on both sides type inequality. All right, you'll notice that there's a negative 3x and a positive 1x, so we're going to move the negative 3x over since it's smaller. So we'll plus 3x to the other side. Okay, so that goes away. Now you've got 10 is greater or equal to 6 plus 4x. You're at a 2-step, so now subtract your 6. All right, subtract your 6, and then take 10 minus 6, which is 4, is greater or equal to 4x. Divide by the 4. So now you're going to have 1 is greater or equal to x. Or if you don't like writing it that way, then you can say x is less than or equal to 1. Right? Both of these are written the same way. I don't want to use the word or because that makes it look like a compound inequality. All right, so you can use either one of those. That means 1 has to be bigger or equal to the number, or the number has to be smaller or equal to 1. Right? But that's your final answer. Right? So translating has to happen correctly first before you can solve it correctly. All right, so use this to help you study and prepare for the upcoming test. Right? The test is going to have everything that you see here on it, right, so that you're ready for it.